which is called the human race. And the human race is you as a Thetan vigorously pushing and shoving and fighting and clawing a bunch of other Thetans to pick up a zygote, which is a fertilized egg and a sperm at the moment of conception. Now, when you do this, you have already done a time shift and a space shift. So you're not necessarily back in 1989 or 88. You could be in the year 1200 or the year 3000. That's how I got into the year 22 BC in my last lifetime when I was Jesus' father. Because when I came back after the lifetime, after the previous lifetime, I came back not sequentially in time or chronologically in time, but I came back at the year 22 BC, and I was the son of Amiohai the cantor in Nazareth, you know, and there I was. But this getting back to the Between Lives area again, here you are totally wiped out with your memory from the 3 sessions that you've had in the Between Lives area on Mars, and you come back and you have to fight all these people. You get this beautiful sound of a baby crying. You get all of these suggestions. You also get a false, dear soul's picture of Jesus, which most people get. They see this picture of Jesus, and when they come back to life, they think he's a nice guy. He was really the biggest suppressive that ever lived. And the fact is that when you're fighting all these other Thetans to pick up the zygote, you have to be a real bastard, a real son of a bitch, because you have to literally knock them out of the way dead to get to that fertilized egg. And what could happen? You could go through 11 attempted abortions by the time you get reborn and go through the Between Lives area after each one. Let's say you pick up a zygote and the mother aborts the fetus. That means you got to go square one back to the gates of Mars on the bridge and go through another 69 days of bullshit. And then pick up another. You have to keep fighting until you get to that baby, and that baby actually survives to birth.
See, when you said a minute ago that Jesus was the biggest suppressive who ever lived, now doesn't suppressive actually mean someone who's doing something that's contrary to the organization called Scientology?
That's one definition. The other definition is a suppressive is anyone who suppresses you as a Thetan.
Oh.
Okay? There's a multiple definition. I don't even have to look it up. I can tell you right away. It suppresses you as a Thetan. How did Jesus Christ suppress us as Thetans? He created the Between Lives area.
Didn't you once say to me something about psychologists having something to do with Between Lives area?
No.
Maybe I misunderstood.
Well, what's the Scientology attitude towards psychologists?
Well, obviously, I'll tell you right away. Let's supposing a person has a problem with their wearing a necktie or a problem with drinking milk. What the hell can psychiatry or psychology ever find out about my past lives to correct this problem? They'll look at environment, they'll look at genetic blueprint, they'll look at all kinds of unimportant present lifetime garbage factors, but they're not going to find out that I was hung in the square of Malaga, and they're not going to find out that my ex-wife 8 lifetimes ago in Tahiti poisoned me with milk. And therefore psychiatry and psychology is a false science that does not work, that actually traps the Thetan into thinking also falsely that things that they can actually heal or cure or proof up a body, and they can't. In fact, they actually cave people in. Seriously.
Have you ever taken any formal position against psychologists? Did you ever participate in any?
Oh, yes.
Anything?
I was one of the delegates to the Psych Bust.
What was that?
To the at Flag, we had a major rally in April of '87, and there were delegates from every org on the planet at this place, and I was one of the delegates from the Fort Lauderdale mission at the time. They had some. I was at that time still connected with Fred Hare at the mission before I was routed to the org when Fred Hare's work was done. Actually, Fred Hare's work shouldn't have been done, because if he had stayed on, nothing like this would have happened. I personally think that it was the org that screwed things up and made some mistakes. There's a lot of people there that are, well, like Umberto, the one who cut my arm with a scissor and chopped off a half an inch out of my flesh. Those kind of people are really pretty Theta people, but the mission people were nice.
But Anyway, back to the psych bust.
Okay, the psych bust took place in April, I think it was April 9th of '87. We went to Flag, and we were given a big briefing on
Where?
the Flag land base in Clearwater, Florida, 210 South Harrison Avenue at the Fort Harrison Hotel. And in the ballroom of on the 10th floor of Flag, we were given a private briefing by some of the execs of CCHR. Dennis Clark is the head of CCHR. You may know of him. He was the one who found that Jolly Llewellyn West gave an elephant LSD, you know. Another one that was there was Fred Freddie Ulan, U-L-A-N. And the two of them gave a great briefing on how we were going to eliminate psychiatry in the world, and what we had to do as individual Thetans in order to do that. One of the plans to eliminate psychiatry initially in this country is to see to it that psychology and psychiatry can no longer bill insurance companies for their therapy. That'll cut their financial lines right away, you know. And there's a big push going on now with CCHR to introduce certain legislative measures in Washington to eliminate psychology and psychiatry procedure codes.
What does CCHR stand for?
Citizens Commission for Human Rights. They're the only organization in the world today that exposes the dangers of psychiatry, and I have quite a lot of literature from them. Freedom Magazine is always full of it, full of that literature, and I also have a lot of the briefing notes from that time. I have them here. And of course, we went through some of the things such as electric shock therapy. They brought in that electric shock machine made by a company ironically called Somatics Inc. That's the name of the manufacturer of the ECT machine, you know, if you know. And how drug therapy is being administered to the school children, how Ritalin is rampant, and that the kids are buying and selling it because it's actually a controlled substance, you know. The problem with drugs is that it prevents the body from exteriorizing on one hand, and certain drugs, like LSD, do an involuntary exteriorization of the thetan from the body. Recently, I read that some forms of crack were also responsible for involuntary exteriorizations. So there's like a duality here of the inhibitors that prevent, certain drugs inhibit the body, the thetan from leaving the body, and certain other drugs force the thetan out of the body. But it's all bad because you're the effect of these drugs.
We're talking about drugs. Haven't you also had an opinion about caffeine?
Well, caffeine causes AIDS. Well, not causes AIDS, it's the catalyst for AIDS. I personally have some knowledge of this because when I was in Auschwitz, at that time, Dr. Joseph Mengele was working on biological and germ warfare. And he developed a virus, which at that time nobody knew what it was called, which would create a imbalance in the immune system, which later on I found out through Scientology was the AIDS virus. It was
saying Mengele was one who developed AIDS?
He was the creator of the AIDS virus. And he did it while I was in the concentration camp.
So what does caffeine have to do with it?
Caffeine is the catalyst by which a person who has exposure to the virus comes down with the full-blown AIDS disease. The fact of the matter is, if you have the virus and you don't have caffeine, you can't get the disease. That's true. After the war, when they did experiments, after World War II, when experiments were done by I.G. Farben in Africa with a lot of the natives, and in Argentina, another company did some in Argentina under Mengele. He was continuing these experiments. They were done on two fronts. It was like they were playing the birthday game too, but in a negative way. They actually showed how in control groups, those people that took caffeine in their systems got the disease, while the ones that were never given caffeine but were given the HIV-3 virus never came down with it and were healthy.
How would you find this out?
Well, my case involved, my auditing involved the Mengele business.
So in other words, everything.
So I was also